Hi everybody, this is Mark from pondalgesolutions.com, and in this video I want to talk very briefly and go through this quickly. We want to cover the topic of dealing with string and hair algae in a small pond or water garden. This is our step-by-step process or protocol, if you will, that we'll go through in trying to remedy the problem through natural means, some holistic steps, before we ever get to a point of using a chemical. And so we wanted to provide this to you as sort of a roadmap that you could follow that may help you improve the problem and clear up your pond without using any algicides or anything like that. So the first step that we're going to take, we want to accurately measure the gallon size of the pond. You may already know the gallon volume of the pond, and if so, that's good. If not, try to get an accurate measurement. You would generally take the length in feet times the width in feet times the depth in feet, and then take that total number by 7.85, and that will give you the gallons. It's important to get the gallon volume down because natural treatments, if they're underdosed, will not work very well. If you use a chemical treatment later on, you don't want to overdose with those. That can bring out even more problems if you have fish. So getting an accurate size on the pond is very, very important. The second thing we want to do is we want to assess fish loading, our feeding routines, and the filtration that we may have in place. Algae is there predominantly because of high nutrients, high nitrates in the water. The sun will also play a role in this, but in this case we want to focus a bit more on the nutrient levels and try to reduce those. For fish loading, we use a reference of, if you have koi, those koi will require about 25 gallons per inch of fish. Goldfish will require about 10 gallons per inch of fish. If we had, let's say, 10 koi at 12 inches long, that's 120 inches of fish there. We would multiply 120 by 25. It gives us a total number. And then if that number is over our gallon capacity of our pond, for example, then the fish could definitely be a problem. You'll want to address that by lowering the fish load, finding homes for some of these, and taking some of the stress off the pond. Some of this also is related to feeding. Many times people will have an algae problem, but when they cut back a little bit on feeding volume and routine and frequency, they actually have the algae regress, because this feed, if it's not eaten, will break down into nutrients. Also, if fish are overfed, they create more waste, and so that's all a factor. So you might experiment with feeding routines. Filtration is also a factor here too. If your filters are not large enough in capacity to handle not only the gallon size but the fish load that they are carrying in that pond, fish will raise the nutrient demand or nutrient levels, and it will put more of a demand on the filtration. And so it's the filter, particularly a biofilter, that would take this out, and if it's undersized or undercapacitated, it won't do as good of a job. And so you want to definitely look at all those particulars to make sure that these things are in balance to some degree and working the way they should. Number three, because some of the problem involves high nitrates in the water, which algae is feeding on, if you can do some 10% daily water changes over a period of a week or two, you may see the algae reduce. If you can, in a sense, wash out some of those nutrients and lower them that way, you may find that the algae will regress a bit by doing that. Step 4, we also want to provide some shade if we can. We'll do that in various forms. We might add desirable plants. We might build a physical structure that provides some blocking of the sun. We might use something like sunshades. Now, shade is not as critical of a step as it is with green water compared to string algae, but it still is helpful and worth consideration, because really two legs of this problem that's supporting algae is nutrients and sun exposure. All plants thrive on that, so if we can provide shade, we may improve things. Number 5, we finally get to the beneficial bacteria. We would add this based not only on the pond volume again, which is again why it's important to get a gallon size accurately assessed for the pond, but we also want to consider the nutrient load. If algae is prolific and widespread, you can bet that you've got very high nutrients, and in many cases we will take a pond size gallon volume. That will be our baseline level, and then we may even double the amount or dosage to try to offset high nutrients as well. You can use a good deal more of bacteria than what a pond might seem to require in great safety. You want to have good aeration going, but with great safety, compared to a chemical where you really have to follow the instructions closely. If you overdo it, you could cause a lot of problems. So bacteria is very safe in that regard. So we would institute a bacterial regimen and get that going. That'll prime up your biofilter. It will also add bacteria to the pond body itself, and that's very useful. We would also look at adding plants. Underwater grasses, surface plants like lotuses or lilies are useful for creating shading. Plants work cohesively with the bacteria to outcompete the algae for the available nutrients and clean up the pond, which is very, very important. Now, we would run this bacteria and regimen supplementation for 60 days. Usually within the first 30 to 60 days, if it's working as it should, it will begin to regress the algae. That's indicating that you are actually reducing nutrients, you're locking them up, you're cutting them off from algae support, and therefore the algae will begin to regress on its own. And with string algae, you will oftentimes see this stuff beginning to go backwards rather than progress out and spread more throughout the pond. Now, if we don't see improvements in those 60 days, we might do some water testing. We might look at pH. We might look at alkalinity and water hardness and see where those things are at. We might consider trying another or different blend of beneficial bacteria. We might add more plants. We might institute barley straw in its many forms. It could come in pellets, concentrated liquid, or actual barley straw, because it can work in a different way to deal with the algae problem. And we might also look at pond dye if that's something that suits the pond owner's desires, because again, it provides some additional shading. All these things stack up along with the beneficial bacteria to continue to work against the algae in various ways. Some in similar ways, but some in completely opposite ways, to work against the growth of the algae, but all are very useful and they do work together. Now, if we've tried this through a series of experiments, 60-day runs, and we're still not getting improvement with the bacteria, we may look at adding a chemical additive or a control measure that's specifically suited to string algae or hair algae. Now, compared to green water, UV light, for example, will not work on string algae. And in fact, if you have string algae and not have green water, and you've tried some bacteria and you're still not getting improvements, I suggest you turn the UV light off indefinitely until you see green water come along again. Leave the UV off. It's not helping, at least with algae control in this case, because string algae can't pass through it, but it may be knocking down your good bacteria. So turn the UV off, let the bacteria build up unimpeded, and see if that doesn't provide better results. You will hear people talk about ultrasound and ultrasonic systems being used for algae control, and those are being used to good effect in some cases, but we generally don't recommend them anymore for small ponds. There are usually better alternatives. They're very expensive, and they do not work on all algae types, although as with everything else, there are cases where people have had success with it, and if you're dead set on looking into it, certainly investigate it more and see if it fits your needs. Pond ionizers are another new tool that have been instituted in the last couple years. These release copper ions into the water using a small electrical charge between two anodes. Copper is something that I think generally should not be used in ponds with fish. Again, you'll hear of some people using them to good effect, but generally these ponds have very stable pH readings and chemical numbers, or I should say mineral numbers, and they can get by with that. But if your pH swings very much, the copper concentrations can fluctuate a great deal, and that can cause some major problems for fish. If you don't have fish or no plans to put fish in, let's say a fountain or estuary or something, then a pond ionizer may be a viable tool to use, and they're generally trouble-free. We also will use peroxide-based granule algicides for rocks, waterfalls, and stream beds. In many cases, plants in the pond body as well as bacteria in the pond body will not help concerning rocks, waterfalls, and stream beds. So we usually use a peroxide-based product, something like Algae Off, to apply directly on the algae. This works great as a spot treatment, but we do not use it for broad control. We do not use it for major cleanup in the pond body. And mainly it's just due to safety. You just simply want to be very careful whenever you're applying any chemical product to the pond body. But the peroxide-based tools are very safe to use if they're used as we direct them, and that's for spot control on the rocks, waterfalls, and stream beds. Other chemical options do exist for the pond body itself. These might include algae fix. You want to read the label directions closely for products like this. This is a non-copper based algicide, which we do prefer those over copper containing ones. But any of these have certain characteristics to kill algae very quickly, and in so doing they can cause problems for fish. If the algae dies off quickly, you want to make sure that you have abundant aeration going during the treatment period. Remove, I think, physically what you can of the algae before treatment. That's useful too. And always be careful and follow the directions on a chemical treatment when you can. That's just good advice to follow. But generally, you won't have to get to this point if you are able to apply the things that we talked about in the initial steps here, using good management practices, beneficial bacteria, and some of the other supplementary products. Many times these alone will improve things, as does good filtration and good aeration. So we hope this is helpful, and if you have any questions or any other concerns, please visit us at pondalgaesolutions.com, and we're happy to help. Thanks a lot.